Hello, I'm Paul Bartlett. I'm a wood turner here in Southwest Florida. And the purpose of this video is to show you a new method of segmented wood turning. It was developed by Ted Beebe, a wood turner from Vermont, who also spends his winters down here in Florida. And it's called the Beebe stave system. I prefer the word method. He has an article in the American Wood Turner, and it's the December 2020 issue. Okay. It involves making a wedge and drawing your staves on the wedge, cutting them out on a bandsaw, and I'll show you how it works. First of all, you design your whatever you want to make and lay it out. So that it could be a bowl, a hollow form, any shape you can think of. And so here's a 9-inch bowl, 4 inches high. This is my segment here that I need to get. And I use 36 wedges to a bowl, which means I have to create a 10-degree wedge. And I put a bottom in them. Now, Ted Beebe has made bowls out of 20-degree wedges where he brings the points all the way to the bottom, and there's no need to put a bottom in the bowl. And those bowls are beautiful. You got some really nice grain pattern, and because of the 20-degree wedge, it works okay because the point is kind of blunt. But with a 10-degree wedge, this point down here gets very fragile. So I end up putting a bottom in mine, and it just makes my life a little bit easier. So you draw the wedge out. I make mine in this case 14 inches long, and it would become 3 1/4 inches high. So I can get 4 staves out of each one. So what I do, so that I don't waste material by cutting off all that materials, I make a block, which is 1 1/8 thick by 3 1/4 wide by 14 inches long. And I cut my 10 degrees down through here where I leave 7/8 of an inch, which leaves me about 3/32 to clean up, 1/16 of an inch for the kerf that I do on the bandsaw, and 3/16 of an inch of a flat, which this 3/16 here would be this flat here would be this flat here. So now you only need, if you get 5 of these boards that are 1 1/8 by 14 inches long, you'll end up getting 40 wedges out of it. And you only need 36. You always want to make a few extra. And then later, after we create the wedges, we cut a 5-degree cut here, which brings that wedge centered, so that you don't have all the angle on one side. It centers it. And that's just kind of the general idea of it. We're going to continue on the bandsaw. So. Okay. Here are some of the other shapes we've done with this stave system. Here's one that Ted Beebe did out of 18 staves, which your wedge was at 20 degrees, and he brought them all to a point. So there was no need to put a bottom in there. And as you can see, you get some very interesting grain going on there. He's done several of these and they all look fantastic without having to put a bottom in. Here's the wedge with his staves laid out on it. Here's some nested eggs I did. I believe I made these out of 10 degrees, so there would be 36 staves for each egg. There's the layout for them, and my trace patterns are up here that I made. There's the egg, and the inside of the egg. There's all the 7 eggs. And here's one I like to call my ugly 8. The wedge here, and then for the stave layout, here's all the staves after they're cut out. An interesting part about this is if you see number 8 here, number 8 here, those are leftover pieces. I put those together and created this vessel here in the back, which in my mind is the better looking vessel of them all. So you can always do something with the leftover pieces. Here's a Klein bottle I did. Now I could have made the stave all in one piece here, but I needed to get inside of the bottle, so I made it in two halves. And then for the tube here, I made tubes, and then I cut them at the proper angles to get my 180-degree elbow. Here's a set of 7 nested bowls from Eastern Red Cedar, aromatic cedar. And here's the layout for them. And these are also 10 degrees, so there would have been 36 of these wedges. And these are all true radiuses here. So this is a ribbon Streptohedron I made. It consists of making 2 bowls and cutting them in half, reorientate them, and putting them back together in this configuration. And there's the layout of the staves on the wedge. And as I do a lot of times, you can see the veneer on the edge here, which always makes it a little nicer if it gives it some a little bit more character, I guess you could say. And these segments, these staves need to be at 45 degrees. Very important for this, very important. And the radius has to be a true radius, okay? Meaning it's symmetrical about a center line. And this was also 36 staves per bowl. And the last one I have here is probably one of my nicer ones. I did this one with 24 staves. So the wedge was at 15 degrees. And there's the layout. So I did my 15-degree wedge. I laid out my largest vessel, scaled it down until it fit just inside of the large one, and then scaled that one down so it fit just inside of the smaller one. And here again, you've got a lot of leftover pieces here that you can do something with. That's when you can really be creative. And So that's the last one that I wanted to show you. Okay, I'm ready to cut the wedges out on the bandsaw. So what I've done is I have made a 10-degree fence for my bandsaw, just made out of 3/4 sanded plywood. Draw a line on here so that when I'm cutting, I just have an idea of how I'm tracking with the bandsaw. So basically I just go and I pick up from I had my end lines on here, I pick that up and draw that line on there. It just gives me a reference line to make sure something isn't starting to track off. And it does with this fence. There's not much you can do about it, but so here we go. You need to hold it up against the fence tight, because that's really important. Once you drift away a little bit, your blade goes off and you kind of ruin them. So nice and slow, don't force it. Okay, so now I've got them like that. Okay, I've got my wedges all cut up, and now we need to sand them. So I'm going to show you the sled that I've used for mine on my sander. I have the Performax 1632, and the sled are really easy to make. This is just a piece of shelving out of the big box store. I think it usually comes 12 inches wide by whatever length this is, 2 feet. And so what I do is I cut a piece and I cut a 10-degree angle on it. If you remember, this dimension here would give you a real good start on where you would cut it. So that's 1 3/4 inches to the peak of the 10 degrees. It kind of goes all the way along there. And I cut this down to 10 inches. So you take the piece on a nice flat surface like this, and you stick the 10-degree board underneath and keep it nice and even. And with I would hope everybody has one of these because they are invaluable. So I'll turn that on, and I'm going to zero it out on my tabletop. Get that up where you can see it. Okay, and we're going to zero it out. Okay, now you keep this board lined up with the edge here. here. And slide your wedge underneath there and check it here. Check it on both ends at least. And when you get it, slide it in and out to get your perfect 10 degrees here, but keep it parallel. You may have to go in a little, you have to go out a little, whatever you gotta do, keep it parallel. And you could pre-drill holes in this, which makes it a little easier. When you get it where you want it and your 10 degrees looks good, just put 3 screws in there, and you can trim this off. I trimmed mine off, I think at 10 inches, and being flush came out pretty close. So if you use the 1 3/4 dimension here, 10 inches here on your sled, if you're trying to make a 10 degree one, you're going to be pretty close. So you screw it down, and then you just check it, and I don't know if you can read that or not, but it's right on 10 degrees. That one's right on 10 degrees. Even in the middle, I think it checks out pretty good, 10 degrees. So that's as good as it gets. And okay, I'm ready to run the wedges through the sander here. So I like to take a little bit off all of them so they kind of get even, and then I can gradually take more until I get the surface fully cleaned up. So you won't be able to hear me with the dust collector on, so I'll run a few through here and then we'll shut it down and I'll finish them up and we'll go on to the next. Okay, we have the wedges all sanded. They came out pretty good. They're just a little shy on the top, but not enough to matter. So now at this point, if you're going to put a veneer on to your parts, which I do more often than not, because it really makes, it gives your bowl a lot more character, a little better design and everything. In this particular case, where we're going with this bowl, it wouldn't be practical. But if you're going to put veneer on, then now is the time to put it on. So you make it a little bit bigger than your piece, glue it onto the sanded side, and then you can just trim up. You need to trim this edge up straight, maybe on a belt sander or something. And because now we're going to trim these. I'm sure some of you have probably noticed along the way that all my angle is on one side of the wedge. Okay, so we need to have 5 degrees on this side and 5 degrees on this side to make the 10-degree wedge. So what I do in that case now is I cut this edge here at 5 degrees. Okay, and then that will center up my wedge. In other words, it'll be symmetrical on both sides. Put the 90-degree side down, and I just touch the bottom edge. I don't want to take any more off than I have to. And if they were a little fatter, I could take more off, but I don't want to lose any more on my thing. And then I cut them off. So once you have all your wedges sanded and you've checked them and they look like a pretty good 10 degrees each, the way to check them, these are 10 degrees each. So I put 9 of them together, that would give me 90 degrees. And put on a few rubber bands to kind of hold it tight. And what you need to do, you need to just check it with a square and see how it looks. Now these look good for 10 degree after I did the second sanding of the opposite side, and that helped a lot. So they all came out pretty close to 10 degrees. And so when I put a square on this, I'm not sure if you can see it, but these look perfectly 90 degrees with 9 of them. That means that their 10 degrees was really good on those. And if you think about it, you have 36 staves, wedges all together, staves. And if you're off 1/10 of a degree, then you got the accumulation is 36 tenths. That's 3.6 degrees. That's not going to work. So, I mean, you might make it work. The way I glue them up all at one time will account for some of that, and you'll see later. So it's very important to check these wedges along the way and to start out with a good piece of wood, true flat on both sides, and you'll come out okay. Just wanted to add that note in there. Okay, we have the wedges are ready to be laid out, and the way I start is putting these beginning and ending lines on here for the beginning and ending of the stave so that I can get them positioned correctly. Alright, so we know that our bowl is 4 inches deep, so that's the end of this. And so I come 4 inches in from this end, and on the other end I come in 4 inches, and that gives me my last one. My second one, I'm starting 3 inches in and ending 7 inches out, which gives me the 4 inches. And the same thing over here. I go on 7 and 3, and I trace around. So it's pretty much, and I put those lines on all of them, so it makes it pretty quick and easy once you get those lines in the right place. This goes flush on the end, flush at the top, and flush at the bottom. Then you just trace around. Like that. So that's one. Two. Okay, on the bandsaw, we need to make all these straight cuts first with the blade, with the table level. Alright, so I made all these cuts in and on all the pieces. Now we need to tilt the bandsaw table 5 degrees. We're going to cut these staves out, and you always start at the thick end and cut it out. So I'll cut this one out, and then I'll shut the video down and I'll do the rest of them. I have all the staves sanded, just take the fuzz off them from the bandsaw. And I'm going to show you now how I glue these up all one at a time. Or all at one time, excuse me. So I've laid them out here and I taped them with a very strong duct tape. I use the Gorilla tape that seems to work real well. What you don't want to do is use like a blue tape or regular masking tape, because when you put all that glue on there, it's going to be like working with a slippery snake. Everything goes all over the place. So what I do is I do that. I kind of trim it away from the bottom, because I will be having a band clamp around there, and I like to remove the tape after I've got everything clamped in place. So what we're going to do, find some glue here. Okay, now I just put the glue down in there, use plenty of it. The more you use, the longer you have to work with everything. Just get your clamps ready, figure out where you're going to go with your clamps and how you're going to do it, because you don't want to have to stumble through that with all this wet glue on there. So, there we are with that. Now I'll just bring this around like that. Try to do it so you can see the gap close on me here. If you do it slowly, it takes the glue a bit of a a little bit of time to, there we go. Okay, so that's it. You have a wet sponge nearby just to clean up the initial mess. Okay, now I'm just going to rinse my hands off. I'll be right back. Okay, now I just use band clamps and clamp it together, not very tight at this point. Just enough to hold it together. Then you turn it over and you take all of these and you kind of just push them to the outside, make sure they're all far to the outside as they go. Once in a while one will slip in and you need to get it out there. Okay, so I have ribs on the bottom of my table here, and I have it marked on the end where the center is. So I'm still going to leave that. I'll tighten it up a little bit now. Okay. Now to squeeze these in on the top, I have found an upside down bowl that will take the pressure is good. So here's an old epoxy bowl I had that I just did a long time ago playing around. So that, when I push down on that, is going to squeeze all in. If you watch right in here, you'll see the glue squeeze out, hopefully. See it coming out there. Believe me, you can put some pressure on this epoxy. It is strong stuff. I've got squeeze out on every joint all the way around. And just to relax things a little bit, I like to go around and tap that, and then go in and tighten up the bottom a little more. And that's it. That is glued up. And all the, you see that squeeze out all the way around. It always looks good. Now here's when I take the tape off. Hopefully, probably won't get it all. As you can see, it looks pretty good to me all the way around. Clean the glue up as much as you can, and this will set overnight, and the glue underneath will still be a little soft in the morning, so I turn it upside down and just let it dry, because there's no air getting under there, so the glue doesn't dry that well. Okay, the bowl is glued up. I took it out of the clamps off, cleaned up the top a little bit so it was flat, put it in my cold jaws on the lathe, and now I'm going to bore out the bottom so I can fit my added base on there. So first of all, we'll just clean this up a little bit. Then I'm going to bore my hole for the base. I just make it any size. I kind of want my base to be able to blend it in like that. So the hole doesn't, I'm going to make the base to fit the hole. Okay, I have my bowl. I have the bottom glued in, and I've tapered it down a little bit. I've cut a recess in the bottom so I can hold it with my chuck. Now I'm just going to clean up the outside surface. So here we go. Now I'm going to clean up the end and turn some of the inside. turning this now until I get my desired wall thickness. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of turning, it's just a matter of cleaning it up. So, continue. Okay, I have my bowl all sanded up and turned down. About a 1/4 of an inch wall thickness is where I like to go. And I had a little problem along the way. I had turned the bowl down thin, and I tried to trim the edge up a little bit, and I ended up with a 4-piece bowl. But like a good Humpty Dumpty, I put it all back together again, and I don't think it's going to matter because of where we're going to go with this bowl. When I get this bowl done, the next video, I'm going to turn it into a fin bowl, like this. So it's going to be a fin bowl, and I don't think the repair edges are going to show up in this fin bowl. The epoxy I use is High Gloss Ultra Clear from Fiberglass Coatings in St. Petersburg, Florida. I found it to be the best. I've tried not all of them, but a lot of them. And you kind of get what you pay for. This stuff is, in my opinion, the best. So now I've got the epoxy mixed up. I'm using a brush with the bristles are guaranteed not to come out, so we don't have to stop and pick those out of the wet resin. And I have this tube glued on here that allows me to, it's just hot glued on and into the recess where I had my chuck. So it allows me to just put it on the slow turner and do that. So let's put some finish on it. It makes it easy because you got like a handle to hang on to while you're putting this stuff on there. This will take 3 coats if normally, and I'll probably put 3 coats on it. Turning it into a fin bowl, that might not be necessary, probably 2 coats. Epoxy, as you know, is self-leveling, so that's why the slow turner and a speed of about 9 RPM. I have, as you can see, I don't know if you can see them here, but I've got six slow turners that all turn at that speed. It seems many times I've had 2 or 3 items ready to turn at one time and had to wait. Now this, okay. So that's going to turn like that for probably 2 hours until it gets tacky, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. Then I'll come on and I'll put another coat on. It looks pretty bad after the first coat. Put the second coat on, it looks much better. Third coat is usually pretty good. So here I got the finished bowl. I've taken it off of the slow turner. I did 2 coats with it, and then I put it back on the lathe, and I took, it was pretty thick at that time, so I took a lot of the epoxy off and smoothed everything out and resanded it. And when I put it in the lathe to remove the epoxy, I just used cabinet scrapers, cheap cabinet scrapers at about 150 to 60 RPM, and it just takes that epoxy off of there really quick. It took maybe 20 minutes to do what I had to do. I put it back on the slow turner and put another thin coat on it, and it came out really, really quite well, as you can see. So I haven't finished the bottom, but the recess in the bottom now, and all I do is I set it upside down and pour a little, sign it, and then pour a little bit of a epoxy in there, and it's done. So that's the final product.